If you've been waiting to see something new from Begg Knives, this one's for you. Look, I get it. It's not easy being a knife collector before Blade Show. It seems like everybody is reviewing the same thing. There you are on your phone, on your computer, and yet everyone is talking about the same knives. And it can get old. We get bored. We want to see something new, something exciting. Maybe something from a knife company that's been doing a whole lot of exciting lately. This is the Begg Knives Diamici, and not only am I reviewing it, but it appears that I am the only one reviewing it, which is a rarity because normally by the time I get my paws on something new, on something fresh, so has everyone else. So shout out to Begg Knives for making this possible. They did send this my way for review, and I'm excited. This is the Begg Knives Diamici. Let's check it out. If you've heard me say it once, you've heard me say it a million times. 2023 is the year of the knife, and what I mean when I say that is that this year it seems like manufacturers and knife designers are really pulling out all the stops. We're getting some seriously cool designs. It seems like they're pushing the limits, they're pushing the price tags, and it goes without saying that, of course, Begg Knives is doing the same. Now, we've seen plenty of videos on the Osteo, we've seen videos on the Begg Bodega, the Mini Glimpse. It's time that we talk about a knife that no one else has had a chance to talk about. And before you go and say, well, maybe other reviewers just don't find this interesting. Currently, at the time of recording this, these are not yet available, but given the longevity of videos and when you might be watching it, I will actually pin the link to where you can see these online so that you can check for yourself. Now, they are being listed at about $120. And I know a lot of people are going to say, but why? But why? 120 bucks. We want sub 100. That's actually a really, really good price for a Begg Knives design, guys. Here's what I mean, okay? We'll start off with the specs. Steel frame, G10 inlays, steel ball bearing pocket clip with a steel liner, and D2 on the blade. This is not some crappy D2, okay? This D2 was recently tested by a channel that many love and respect called Love Them Knives, and he actually sent it in for a PMI test, and he found that the Begg knife that he tested, which was an Osteo, or excuse me, it was a Bodega, had D2 at 62 HRC. 62! There's a ton of knives out there with M390 that's not at 62. Looking at you, Tucson. So before you come at me with that whole spiel about how, oh, well, I can get a Tucson with titanium and M390. Well, guess what? Your Tucson has 59 HRC M390. There, I said it. And guys, I like Tucson, okay? I'm just here making sure that you understand the difference. D2 at 62 HRC is going to have way better edge retention than M390 at 59. The story goes that Begg Knives has had knives in the past OEM'd by companies like We Knives and Riot, and when I asked them recently after they sent these to me for review, they didn't necessarily give me any names. They just said we have our own manufacturing groups that we trained just like we trained We and Riot. So while that doesn't necessarily tell me who's doing the work, it does tell me that A, it's not We, B, it's not Riot, and C, we should be expecting some really, really good design language on here, as well as fit and finish. So did they deliver? I believe so, because these edges are nicely knocked down. It didn't come with any loose screws. The pivot wasn't over tightened. The edge bevel seems nice and consistent and evenly distributed. If you ever look at the tip of a knife, you can sometimes see that one bevel might be a bit wider than the other, and that's pretty typical on knives in general, but you can always tell when a knife is well made when they are even, and this is pretty close to even. I'll see if I can get that in there. It's pretty close to even, guys. That's about as even as it's going to get. We are looking at a drop point blade with a flat grind on the finish. This one is a satin flat grind. Of course, if you're interested in these, they are making some that have a black and green inlays, as well as Damascus blade options. So if you're not really into D2, you can get one in Damascus. And no matter whether you get one with or without Damascus, or with or without the green inlay, they're all going to be 120 bucks. This is actually very, very impressive. We have a single-sided captive pivot running on bearings, and the action feels good. It's nice and smooth. Is it a guillotine? No, you do have to actually give it a little bit of a wrist flick to get it to fall shut, but it does so smoothly. There's no grittiness to that action at all. Something else is that while this is standard fare being a ball bearing pocket clip, and that is very standard for Begg knives, this one seems a little more refined. It seems to follow the design flow of the knife, and I really enjoy that. You'll notice that the pocket clip is coming in at a bit of a slant. You might be wondering, but why? Why not just have it, be straight like that so that it can sit in the middle of your pocket? Well, your pocket collects a lot of things, and sometimes it's nice to actually have as much room as possible. So this slant, when it goes in your pocket, will follow the seam of your pants. So you can actually put it all the way to the side and it'll fit in flush. The ball bearing ensures that you're not going to be tearing up those pockets when you take it in and out of your pocket consistently, which if you're carrying this knife daily, which I definitely think would be a good idea, you're not going to be tearing up those pockets. You're not going to be wearing out those jeans. And I know the kids these days, they like to, get the prefabricated worn out jeans, but that's a story for another video and maybe actually a different channel. But I digress. The design language on here is very, very well done. For example, look at the spine of the blade. It goes obviously down into the handle skills and the tip disappears, but when it goes up, it follows the lines of the handle skills. Not all knives do that, and even though the ones that do, they don't all do it well, but that geometry line right there is clean, and it's flush, which is great. Let's check the lockup on here, shall we? The lockup on here looks like it's going to be right there around 30%. It's a very nice and solid lockup. I'm not really feeling any blade play left or right, up or down. There is no lock rock. It feels nice and solid, as it should. You know what? When I look at this knife, the very first impression that I get is well, it has shades of Ray Laconico, but then I see that it's got this slant back here towards the butt end of the handle scales, and I find that it actually works really well in a reverse grip, which is surprising. This isn't necessarily a knife that I would go ahead and peg for a reverse grip type of knife, but it actually really is. Jared Van Otterloo is an award-winning knife designer from the Pacific Northwest, but he currently lives in Canada. Now, in a previous video, I may have made the same faux pas, the same mistake that a lot of other YouTube channels have made, which is assuming that he lives in South Africa. He does not. But that doesn't stop us here on YouTube from building his name and building his fame in South Africa. I'm sure that the South Africans appreciate it, but I wanted to be one of the first people to also get that right. So, Mr. Jared Van Otterloo, if you end up watching this, please accept my sincere apologies for making that mistake in a previous video, but now we know better, so we're just going to go ahead and say it. We are looking at T8 on the pivot and T6 on the body screws, and this is one of my very few gripes, is that I really would have liked to have seen T8 all the way around. I don't really see a need for T6 body screws on any knife, really. I mean, you can get a bigger screw size without actually increasing the size of the screw hole. And having T6 screws does make it more susceptible to stripping if you ever do take this knife apart to service those bearings or to clean out the scales or for whatever reason that you might take a knife apart. Let's talk about this inlay work, shall we? The sign of a good inlay is always the transition between the inlay to the rest of the frame. A good inlay is you're not going to be able to feel that edge, and on here it's very smooth and seamless. It's much better than I would actually expect from a $120 knife, the inlay work seems like the kind of inlays that we would get on a knife that costs easily twice as much. Is it the best inlay work? No, but it is pretty dang good, and it's very good for this price point. So I'm not disappointed in the slightest. You will notice that on this satin finish on the blade, it picks up fingerprints like nobody's business, but I don't really care. It's nice and shiny. It has a single directional satin finish, and at the top of the blade here, it doesn't necessarily have what I would call a swedge, but it does have some extra chamfering, which is going to offer relief while cutting. So how well does it cut, you might ask? Let's check it out. Here is a piece of scrap paper. Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty decent factory edge. Could I get this edge better? Absolutely. And it wouldn't necessarily be a big deal for me to go ahead and get that edge to a much sharper angle, but it's going to be perfectly slicey out of the box. And with a HRC somewhere in the realm of 60 to 62, I'm going to say that it's going to hold that edge for quite a long time. Let's go ahead and do a quick comparison against another knife with a steel frame, a knife I've been using in a lot of comparisons lately. This is the CJRB Pyrite, and I'm just going to go ahead and place this here. It's actually a tiny bit longer than the Pyrite, but not by a whole much. It's actually very close to being around the same length. If we were to go ahead and stack them up against each other, you will see that the Diamici is in fact a little bit thicker, and it's also going to be a little bit heavier. We are looking at about 4.06 ounces on the weight, and I did weigh this off camera because my kitchen scale is hideous. I can only make so many jokes about Jenny Craig. So, with that being said, guys, let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. Are you interested in one of these? Are you going to keep your finger on the pulse when they release? Because trust me when I say, if they're not out yet, they will be soon. Make sure to check the link in the pinned comment as well as in the description if you are interested in one of these, because I think that this is a really nice direction for Begg knives to go. It's really easy to overdo it sometimes, and this one has a lot of depth and in its simplicity. So let me know what your thoughts are. Are you interested? Are you not interested? Let's discuss. I'm Rollshambo. I'll catch you on the flip side.